everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda N, and today I'm talking about simulations. Do we live in one, and is there any way to actually know? I can't claim to know for sure, but I think it's a fascinating topic to discuss, so let's dive right in. The simulation hypothesis is the modern equivalent of an idea that's been around for a while, and it's the idea that the physical world that we live in, including the Earth and the rest of the physical universe, is actually part of a computer simulation. You can think of it like a high-resolution or high-fidelity video game in which we are all characters. And the best way to understand it within Western culture is the movie The Matrix, which many people have seen, or even if they haven't seen it, it's become a cultural phenomenon now beyond the film industry. I'm sure that many of you viewers have seen The Matrix, or if you haven't, you at least likely know the premise. This idea of the world around us being fake isn't new though. The simulation or computer element may be, but the skeptical hypothesis, which it evolved from, isn't. Some of these skeptical scenarios range from a brain in a vat hypothesis, where our brain could be kept alive by a mad scientist and be fed false signals by said scientists, or the dream argument, proposed by René Descartes and Zhuangzi, which claims reality is indistinguishable from dreams. There's also the 5-minute hypothesis, which suggests that we can't prove the world wasn't created 5 minutes ago, along with false memories and evidence. A lot of these sound pretty far-fetched if you ask me. I mean, even if we can't prove that everything around us is fake, let's be honest, the idea that the world was created 5 minutes ago, or a very short amount of time ago, is reaching. And I may not be able to prove I'm not a brain in a vat, but I also can't prove that I am either. Arguing something is real or fact just because someone can't prove you wrong is dangerous territory, so I'm not sure how I feel about a few of these skeptical scenarios. But let's move on to the world as a simulation theory. One man, widely credited as the father of modern philosophy, had his own theory, René Descartes. Now, some of his theories are a bit beyond my pay grade, and wrapping my mind around them is honestly headache-inducing. But one article, which makes mention of his 1641 book Meditations on First Philosophy, explains it as this. While such thought experiments might seem glib, and perhaps a little unsettling, they serve a useful purpose. They are used by philosophers to investigate what beliefs we can hold to be true, and as a result, what kind of knowledge we can have about ourselves and the world around us. Descartes thought the best way to do this was to start by doubting everything, and building our knowledge from there. Using this skeptical approach, he claimed that only a core of absolute certainty will serve as a reliable foundation for knowledge. He said, "If you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt, as far as possible, all things." Descartes believed everyone could engage in this kind of philosophical thinking. In one of his works, he describes a scene where he is sitting in front of a log fire in his wooden cabin, smoking his pipe. He asks if he can trust that the pipe is in his hands or his slippers are on his feet. He notes that his senses have deceived him in the past, and anything that has been deceptive once previously cannot be relied upon. Therefore, he cannot be sure that his senses are reliable. Whether or not you agree that we can't trust reality, I do, to some extent, agree with the idea that we should question everything. We should be prepared to answer the question, why do we feel the way that we do? This train of thought eliminates confirmation bias at the very least, but I'm sure, for me anyway, it also induces a hell of a lot of anxiety. Still, it's an interesting way of looking at the world, and one that shouldn't be entirely discredited. And of course, he's far, far from the only philosopher that thought this way. Zhuangzi, excuse my pronunciation, an influential Chinese philosopher, lived in the 4th century BC. His story, The Butterfly Dream, is actually referenced in The Matrix when the lead character Neo asks his visitors whether they had the feeling where they were not sure if they were awake or dreaming.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
This can't be.
Be what? Be real?
In Zhuangzi's Butterfly Dream, it states, "Now I do not know whether I was a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man." The Indian philosophy of Maya and ancient Greek philosophies too question if we're simply dreaming our way through life. And as far as I can tell, the reason René Descartes is so frequently used as an example in these articles referring to simulation theories is just because his theories are a bit more recent, perhaps a bit more modern and detailed than ancient philosophers. But as we know, this isn't where the theory ends. Although these skeptical theories and doubts about reality being, well, real are old, the simulation theory is relatively new. A lot of that is due to the Matrix popularizing these theories and influential people like Elon Musk stating that the odds that we are in base reality has to be 1 in billions. A recent article from Scientific American explains, in 2003, Bostrom imagined a technologically adept civilization that possesses immense computing power and needs a fraction of that power to simulate new realities with conscious beings in them. Given this scenario, his simulation argument showed that at least one proposition in the following trilemma must be true. First, humans almost always go extinct before reaching the simulation-savvy stage. Second, if humans make it to that stage, they are unlikely to be interested in simulating their own ancestral past. And third, the probability that we are living in a simulation is close to 1. Musk is right if you assume propositions 1 and 2 of the trilemma are false, says astronomer David Kipping of Columbia University. How can you assume that? To get a better handle on Bostrom's simulation argument, Kipping decided to resort to Bayesian reasoning. This type of analysis uses Bayes' theorem, named after Thomas Bayes, an 18th century English statistician and minister. Bayesian analysis allows one to calculate the odds of something happening, called the posterior probability, by first making assumptions about the third being analyzed, assigning it a prior probability. After his calculations, the posterior probability that we are living in base reality is almost the same as the posterior probability that we are in a simulation, with the odds tilting in favor of base reality by just a smidgen. These probabilities would change dramatically if humans created a simulation with conscious beings inside it, because such an event would change the chances that we previously assigned to the physical hypothesis. You can just exclude that hypothesis right off the bat. Then you are only left with the simulation hypothesis, Kipping says. The day we invent that technology, it flips the odds from a little bit better than 50-50 that we are real to almost certainly we are not real, according to these calculations. It'd be a very strange celebration of our genius that day. A 50-50 chance we're living in reality. I'm not sure I like those odds even now. Of course, not everyone agreed with them. During a 2016 debate at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, Harvard University physicist Lisa Rondell said that the odds that the simulation hypothesis is correct are effectively 0. For starters, there's no evidence that our world isn't the array of stars and galaxies that it appears to be. And she wonders why advanced beings would bother to simulate Homo sapiens. Why simulate us? I mean, there are so many things to be simulating, she said. I don't know why this higher species would want to bother with us. What I found more interesting, though, was what many opinions on NBC's little poll had to say. I know it's not very scientific, but 57% of people answered the question, do you think we might be living in a simulation, with who's to say it's certainly possible. About 16% fell in the middle with undecided, and 28% said that's absurd. The majority of people that visited this NBC Science page said that it could very well be possible, in a poll with many thousands of votes. I knew the concept was popular, but I wasn't expecting that either. Personally, I do fall into the who knows category. It's possible, because I can't prove that I'm not just a bunch of ones and zeros in a higher powers computer. Maybe we're all a bad game of Sims like Bo Burnham sings in that Going to Heaven song.
None of you are going to heaven. You're not my children, you're a bad game of Sim.
Or maybe this really is our reality, which, in a way, might actually be a bit more of a depressing thought, depending on how you look at it. Some articles even take this a step further and question that, if the world really is a simulation, can we make it crash? Which, honestly, I think is my favorite question in all of this. One article says, the most obvious strategy would be to try to cause the equivalent of a Stack Overflow, asking for more space in the active memory of a program than is available, by creating an infinitely, or at least excessively, recursive process. And the way to do that would be to build our own simulated realities, designed so that within those virtual worlds are entities creating their version of a simulated reality, which is in turn doing the same, and so on all the way down the rabbit hole. If all of this worked, the universe as we know it might crash, revealing itself as a mirage just as we winked out of existence. You could argue that any species capable of simulating a reality, likely similar to its own, would surely anticipate this eventuality and build in some safeguards to prevent it from happening. For instance, we might discover that it is strangely and inexplicably impossible to actually make simulated universes of our own, no matter how powerful our computational systems are, whether generalized quantum computers or otherwise. That, in and of itself, could be a sign that we already exist inside a simulation. But of course, the original programmers might have anticipated that scenario too, and found some way to trick us, perhaps just streaming us information from other simulation runs rather than letting us run our own. I mean, if we do live in a simulation, I think purposefully crashing it sounds like a really risky idea, and I still don't understand how this would work, even if it's an interesting concept. But whether or not you believe in simulation because of these theories, the Mandela effect, unlikely coincidences, the pandemic, or whatever your reasoning is, it's pretty fascinating to think about. So let me know in those comments down below. Have you ever felt like we live in a simulation? Do you really think the chance of that is 50-50? Thanks for watching today's video. Please hit that like button and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!